Drop a like and do share. Leave your comments and do not forget to subscribe for more videos.
Hello and welcome to Edupedia World.
Welcome to SAP UI5 training session. In this session, I am going to discuss on coding standards and naming convention in SAP UI5 application. So whenever we develop any application, we need to follow few things that will be discussed in this session. There are so many naming conventions in SAP UI5 which need to be taken care because the SAP is so many controls are there when we talk about SAP UI5 because SAP UI5 is built on a framework where there are hundreds of controls. So every control has a unique ID and the class names. Class is nothing but the CSS which is used for that particular control. So how it is done, we'll see throughout. So whenever we talk about coding standards, it is very essential. Why? Because there will be bunch of people who are talking in a different language, same language in a different way. Then it will be very difficult to understand as a third person. Similarly, when we talk about any new language in SAP or any other programming language, everyone has to follow certain standards because whenever we develop anything after few days, if we want to have a look at our code, then we need to understand it, or someone who see our code need to understand. If the client asks for any enhancements, then he has to do it. So for certain reasons we have to take care of the development with proper standards. So there are few things which we'll be talking about. The first, naming convention. Whenever we talk about any control, suppose we take a matrix layout. So the matrix layout will be with first letter always capital and second letter whenever it's the matrix layout, the word is changed, so it will be caps. Okay, whenever I talk about controls, always uppercase, the first letter. So when we talk about properties, this matrix layout has a property for called call span, means column space. So this is one of the property. So it uses camel case. So what is camel case is starting whenever the word starts, it starts with small letter, and then whenever the word changes, it starts with capital. That is camel case. And there are events associated to any control. So when there are, it's always small letters. It is one event, press event. If suppose like other events will be there, like on after rendering or something. On after rendering is an event. So on is small. After the word changes, so A will be capital. Like that. Rendering word changes, so R will be capital. Like that. So all camel cases. Okay, the control method names. So these method names are functions. You will write your function, own function. That time you have to use camel case. Do something is a function name. Then the control has aggregations. So aggregation names always with a lowercase letter and use camel case for concatenating words. And same applies to associations as well. First letter will be a lowercase and then Whenever the word changes, we'll be using camel case. The control, properties, events, everything has a unique names to avoid clashes. So that is why we need to be very careful. So we need to use a generic names which are not associated to that control, because so that we can't clash. So for example, we'll take a new button control I'm taking. So in this we have event called press. So it's always small. It has a number of methods. So add, suppose if you want to add any icon to it, so you can add as a set icon. There will be a set icon, that is nothing but a method. Okay, small letter and word changes camel case. Like this we have for methods, and we have certain associations. So it always starts with small letter, camel case and camel case. So there are few other things also, the press event and the style. These are all not properties. So it doesn't have any aggregation. So that is why. So we'll go to naming conversions, and this is what it is, the naming conversion camel case. And next we'll talk about reserved characters for control IDs. Always better not to use dash in IDs or classes. Always try to avoid it, this suffix. Why? Because this is being used by the standard. Suppose I'm taking a control here. So normally we'll do F12. We'll see the control. There are button controls. I'm taking a button control. Examples I'm going to, and I'll see the source code. See, whenever he didn't use any ID here, but the ID will be there for this button. How you have to do is right click the button and go to inspect element. You'll find, see, always has a ID underscore. See, underscore ID is there, and always data -SAPUI. This hyphen is used by the standard SAP. So whenever we talk about the classes, this has a class SAPUI button. So this is a class. This is a class name, class name, class name. So we can't use these names. You have to make sure you don't have to use. Okay. So we'll move on to the next, the reserve IDs. So we have seen, right? So basically we have something for SAP UI Bootstrap also. This is the one which we see in index.html. So we'll go to our one of the SAP UI5 application. In that we'll have a look. So bootstrapping at that time, yeah, this is a bootstrapping file. See, the ID is always reserved SAP UI Bootstrap. Okay, that's the reason we shouldn't use this. And this data SAP UI themes is fixed. This means this data holds SAP UI theme, and this data SAP UI preload theme, asynchronous, synchronous, other. So data SAP UI libraries. This means this data, this variable holds the libraries which are used in this application, throughout the application. So what libraries I have used? SAP UI Commons, SAP UI UX3 and SAP UI Demo Kit. These are the things used. So that is what mentioned here. SAP UI Bootstrap. You can't use this because this is reserved IDs. IDs for Bootstrap script tag, the description. And SAP UI core -script. This is deprecated. No need to worry. So whenever we talk about SAP-UI, anything that is for internal use for SAP UI control. And there is /r also, that is for the URLs used. And these are the some other namespaces like SAP UI library used for library script tags. So when we see SAP UI libraries, okay, so in the short form it is in libs. So that's the reason star. So SAP UI theme, which we have seen, this is for which holds the style sheets. SAP UI light rect, it also one of the property in test suits. When we do testing applications, that time we use this. So SAP UI blind layer. So block layer, it's ID for the block layer. And SAP UI static, this is for the static area in SAP UI5. Static means we don't change anything there, it will be fixed. That particular area will be fixed. SAP UI trace window root, this is one of the thing. Trace window root ID, this is ID for trace root. SAP UI XML data, this is the ID for XML data iline. Like this, the IDs are reserved, so we don't have to use this, but it is used by SAP. So whenever we want to override, you can override or declare like data -SAP-UI-libs equal to, you have to give the whatever the libraries you are using throughout the application. Next, we'll go to DOM attributes. So the DOM attributes are nothing but data-SAP-UI means. So whenever we have any HTML page or HTML view, we'll see one of the HTML view here. One of the HTML view here. Okay. In this is one of the HTML view. See here we start with div. HTML view always will be in divisions. So data SAP UI type. So we are declaring which type this control is. So it is SAP UI comments dot button. So like that. So data -text we are giving. So text is a property like this will give. So that is used for like this. It's a DOM attribute. And whenever we see any control, we can see like this data-SAP-UI. And there are few URL parameters which are fixed, that too. So the namespaces which are used for SAP UI5 is SAP-UI so on for URL parameters. That also has this. And there are certain control CSS. So as I explained you before, we have seen also whenever we talk about this control, these are the control CSS. So these classes are used for button styles. So yeah, here you want to change it to this. See, the button is changed. Now we are changing it. Okay, so like that, the control CSS. So it says the SAP is already have a predefined CSS with associated to controls. So these are the styles. See sap.sav like that. So you can't override this, but if you override it throughout the application, you will be seeing that change. For button, if you override, so suppose sap.ui is for button CSS. Then if you override this CSS, then throughout the application, you will see that change. It is recommended not to use the custom CSS, which is for that particular button. So usually styles are written like this, .sap.ui table like this, and the product none. This is a few CSS. So next we'll move on to compatibility rules. So now we have a version 1.24.5, but SAP UI5 started with 1. It is a one version only, 1.12 it started with. So what does it mean is, so whenever we talk about, now the present version is 1.24.5. So SAP UI uses 3-digit version identifier. One means the major version, and the second digit specifies the minor version. So in our case, we'll take 1.4.3. So 1 means the major version, the 4 means the minor version, and the third digit means the patch. So SAP has two things, even and odd. So every time the patch is odd, is released to outside world, but inside SAP they will be using 1.24.6. The events, all events will be inside SAP only. Outside world, it will be a patch, lesser patch, because the patch which will be released, that will be used by the developers inside SAP, and once they see that everything works fine and no problem, that time they release it to outside world. So the patch versions is only used to identify the releases. So now the evolution taken place is, now they have a public APIs, so that has some meaningful functions, classes, namespaces, and controls, and which have declared their properties, aggregations, and so on. The definition of public APIs are nothing but the features what the API is providing, and it applies to individual APIs. So that will be discussed later in the session. So these are the compatibility changes. So when it is in, one thing we have to make sure, the compatible, whatever the changes we make with the versions, that is added to the libraries, whatever the libraries SAP UI5 holds, that has thing. And when we have a removed, like when the changes, suppose certain APIs will be removed in certain versions, so that time the compatibility rules doesn't apply. So you have to think about some alternative solution for that particular control. The solution will be given in the new version, but you have to think of, and you have to come up with some other API and you can use that. So removing an API, the following changes to existing APIs are incompatible, can only be done in a new major release. So once you remove an API, this all library namespaces, functions, and related all things will be removed. So need to be very careful when you use the controls, because if it is deprecated, then it will have a problem. but I'm sure there will be some alternative for that particular control. So some research has to be done when it is deprecated. And one more thing, you can use a third-party open source also. Any jQuery supported APIs will be applicable in SAP UI5. So whenever you do it, so it has to be a custom control. And then you'll be using the API. Suppose you have a button now. Button is one API. And in future you want to have a extended button. Now button has few properties, but you want to add few more like touch or animating with that button. Will have a separate API which is available outside SAP UI5. That time you can bring that and use it in your SAP UI5 application. So that's the beauty of SAP UI5. You are not restricted to do only one. You are open to anything which supports jQuery. You can get those libraries, and make use in your application. So there are few experimental flags as well. So this is used when uh, before releasing SAP UI5 major version. They have some experimental flags. So this will be seen in any of the controls like APIs. Whenever you see that time you'll have. So these are the experimental APIs. So this means this is used for experiments, but it is not used. No, you can't say this is final. So they are still experimenting it. If once they see this is okay, then they'll make use of a standard API. They'll convert this to a standard API. See, it's not the POP officially delivered scope inside SAP, but you can still use it, but at any time for no reason they can remove this, can be changed. That's what they meant. So you can demonstrate, test, examine, evaluate, or otherwise you can use experimental features in a live operating environment or with data that has not been sufficiently backed up. Okay, you can, these are the experimental flags. So one more thing, once you develop your application, you want to make sure that it is browser and compatible. So that time, these are the things, libraries which are used for desktop: SAP UI Core, SAP UI Layout, SAP UI Uniform. So this supports any browser. Any browser doesn't mean it is a desktop or a mobile. It supports any platform. And when it comes to desktop, these are the things which will be supported: SAP UI Commons, SAP UI UX3, and SAP UI Table. When it comes to mobile, this will be changed to M. This will be SAP UI.commons will be changed to SAP.M. SAP UI.ux3 will be SAP.m.shell. SAP.ui.table will be SAP.m.table. This will be supported in the browser, my Internet Explorer 9 and above, and Mozilla, any Mozilla latest version it supports, and Google Chrome, any version it supports. So the Mac OS, it supports Safari 5.1 and above. So next we'll see the control like library sap.m. So this is supported in Apple, Android, and BlackBerry phones. Okay. So when we talk about Windows Phone, so Windows Phone need to have a certain CSS that should be added. So when it talks about Apple, iPhone 4, 4S, 5, 6, it supports. But the end of the support date for iPhone 5 is 21st September. So after that, they will not support the Apple mobile devices and Android. So in this Android, Samsung Galaxy S3, S4, Galaxy Tab all are supported by libraries. Now you might ask this question. Suppose like Apple iPhone 5, the support is ending on 21st September 2015. After that, what will happen? It means this SAP will only support Apple iPhone 5 till 21st September 2015. What means in this time you get any error when you use SAP UI5 application, you can directly report to SAP. They will resolve this problem straight away and they'll fix it in their latest patch. That is what they're gonna do. So means use this SAP UI5 library in iPhone 5 till 21st September, come up with bugs, come up with some bugs, they're gonna fix it. That is what they meant. See, the bugs are already fixed inside this date, 21st September 2015. Then the iPhone 5, in iPhone 5 SAP UI5 application can be used anytime. Okay, and there are certain other libraries also. SAP.viz, this is used for charts. Okay, so these are the open source components D3, which in turn relies on compatibility scalar vector graphics. So whenever we talk about charts, and one more advantage of HTML4 and HTML5 is SVG, scalar vector graphic. That is being introduced in HTML5 and it is used in SAP UI5 with the library called sap.viz. This is for charts. And another one also is there for drawing charts. So that is sap.makit. So the devices which are supported is iOS and Android. This is used for mobiles, BlackBerry, Windows, Mac OS also it is supported, and Windows also it is supported. And sap.ui.vbm, this is also supported. So sap.ui.vbm is for sap.ui.vbm. We'll see what are the libraries we do have. So sap.ui.vbm is used for Google Maps. So this is a Google map which gives a geographical location. So it is supported in iOS, Android, and other platforms also, Windows platform and Apple. So next library is sap.io shell. It is also used like sap.m only. It supports in all. And sap.ui.comp supports in Windows and Apple, Mac OS. It is not supported in mobiles. Windows Mobile it is not supported. sap.ui.comp. So we have to make sure before we use any libraries. So we need to see the target audience and we have to come here and check the compatibility rules, and then we'll have to make a decision. So when you want to use sap.suite.ui.commons, that time we have supported devices. It supports in Windows as well as Windows 7 and 8 and Mac OS operating system, BlackBerry, Android and iOS. And these are the compatibility rules of libraries. Now we'll move on to some security information. So when we talk about security information of SAP UI5, we need to see a browser which we are using, that is Google Chrome or any browser. It shouldn't send any data without any proper security. Suppose you have a data, security data. This security will be applicable to SAP UI5 developers and the system administrators who are running SAP UI5 based applications. So whenever we talk about SAP UI5 security, a developer need to take care of the security. Why? Because SAP UI5 is a client-side JavaScript library. So when we talk about the library, it is already built in with some securities. The library, the JavaScript library is very much secured, but when we are handling it on the client side, that time the application developer needs to take care of the security points. So whatever the libraries you'll be using, like APIs, sap.m.button, sap.m.text, those are secured. And when it renders on any HTML page, and when you communicate with other applications, or it is on the server, that time the security need to be considered by the developer. See, Java SAP UI5 is a client-side JavaScript library, so the library itself is designed in such a way that it is secured and it is also tested. It can't ensure the application to be secured. Why? Because the application has so many libraries, so many controls, and outside controls can also be used in SAP UI5. That is why when this SAP UI5 is compared to WebDyn Pro, the WebDyn Pro is completely different. That is a abstract programming model, and the framework handles the HTML rendering. So that time the security is taken by WebDyn Pro servers. This has some JavaScript code and it will be communicating with the browsers. There is a reason the security need to be handled with great care. In this application, we have a lot of responsibilities and freedom where you can use a third-party libraries also inside it. So whenever we do any HTTP server configuration, that has to be very much secure, because HTTP, hypertext protocol, we are doing it and calling our server application. That time it needs to be secure, HTTPS. When we use the backend as ABAP, that time the ABAP will take care of the security whenever you make communication with that particular services. So there are so many guidelines which can be referenced. So for network security, these are guidelines which you can refer, and for solution manager, this service can be referred for SAP Network Gateway, because SAP Network Gateway is one of the web service used in SAP UI5. Actually, SAP UI5 can be communicated with SAP Network Application Server like ABAP or Java or HANA Access Engine or any other standard web servers. And for running SAP UI5 application, we use a browser, application server, and IDE. IDE is where you develop application. That time the developer need to take care of all the coding, whatever they do. It need to be a very security. So we talk about browser security. So whenever we talk about browser security, because the browser has a cross-site scripting, so that need to be taken care. Whenever you make clicks, that time you need to be very much careful about it. So suppose if you take Google Chrome, So Google Chrome. So whenever we have this is an application, suppose think. So this time in this we shouldn't use, as a developer, in the code you will be writing console.log. This is to display any message. Okay, so if you have written, this will be written when you are doing debugging. That time you will write a message, so that in a function you'll write console.log, that function name is do something. So you'll be entering this. Why? Because if when you run your application, you want to check whether the application is going into this particular function or not, that time you'll be using console.log. So do something. So when you say do something will be displayed. So we have to avoid, as a developer, you need to avoid using console.log when you deploy it on the server. Development perspective, that's fine. But when you are deploying your application in one of the servers, that time you make sure that no console.log is left, need to be removed. Console.log need to be removed. That security you need to take care. In the browser, there is a cross-site scripting. So whenever we make a call or something, you have to make sure that the browser URL is correct. You have to check the URL. So how to check the URL? This window dot location. So this is what your browser gives you the URL. So you have to make sure that you are using the correct URL and it is correct, and you can't use the wrong URL, because nowadays the people are having, suppose if you take a facebook.com, they might be replicating the facebook.com with some other URL like fbbook.com. Okay, it looks like it is a facebook.com, and you'll write your email and password. That time it will be malicious attack. So that you need to be taken care. And in the HTML5 we have a local storage. So what is meant by local storage? So whenever you write, see, local storage dot, usually this will be done in HTML. You have to try to avoid it, like username. If you are doing like this, okay, when you say local storage dot get item, usually they use this type of local storage names inside the application. So you need to make sure you don't use this local storage, because whenever we do local storage, you can easily get the variable information like this. So it is not good to use. So use a secure way of storing your variables. APIs, this used to simulate loaded limit data, access is limited to this URL. The browser is not secure storage, so while it is used as a static data. And there is a WebSockets also, the post message and on message. You need to be taking care of this. So system admin will be taking care of all these WebSockets, etc. And as a developer, you make sure that you don't leave such loopholes where the security will be breached. So there is a transport security. So when we transport security, we are sending some information to the server. Suppose if you are uploading a pic, that time you should make sure that the pic is scanned in the backend and it is uploaded without any virus. So that time sessions are very much secured. When you close your browser, the session will be expired. That type of things you need to take care of. And it's always need to be HTTPS request. And whenever you are uploading something, that time you have to pass XCSRF token. That will be useful. So every time the session is alive, the XCSRF token have to be fetched and it has to be sent via the request, upload request. And the server security, so we have few things. The server security, servers are nothing but ABAP, HANA, etc. So those will be taking care of their own security. They have the setup where the HTTP request, whatever they receive it in a proper way and handled through resources, etc. So those things will be taken care by server. So if you are using any third-party library, then you have to make sure that that jQuery is secure, and you have to see the security information about that third-party library, and make sure that you want to have something custom security fixes. You have to do it inside your code. And the secure programming guide will be input validations. Whenever you are making input validations, that time, so user must be done on the server side also, optionally. So there are two ways of data binding. Like suppose if you are modeling, you don't have to send every time to the server. You can do a validation check on the front end, because SAPUI5 is a client side application. So you can reduce the server time, and you can do all the validations on the application itself. Okay, whenever you are giving any output, that time also you can validate and you can show it on the browser. And the URL, whatever you are sending, it has to be validated. So how the URL validations is done, we'll see the URL validations. URL validations are done like this. So if you want to check whether the SAPUI.com is valid or not, so you can add this like this, jQuery.sap. like this. You can add and it will give. So if you want to try, you can try this type of code. It's somewhere here. So it is undefined. Okay, whenever you write HTTP here, yeah, HTTP, then it is undefined. True. So this checks the validation of the URL. So now I'm going to validate the URL sap.http://www.sap.com. So it should return true for me. Yeah, it is returning true. So I'll be changing. I'm removing the A. It's SAP http://www.sp.com. So it has to give false because this URL doesn't validate. See, whenever you pass any wrong URL, the validations can be maintained. Okay, this is how you are validating and maintaining the URL list. So you can give, suppose you can add URL whitelist, means it is to your secured list. sap.com, you means that this is a secured website, so you can add it to the add URL whitelist. So the secured URL validation and cache settings, always the cache need to be cleared. Whenever the browser always stores the cache, so you have to clear that cache every time. So make sure that you don't save anything in the cache unless it's an offline application. And the user management and authentication need to be taken care by the developer. And whenever you make web service call, the authentication need to be checked. Local storage, you can store information. And the last one is HTML sanitizer. So whenever we use this, you have to make sure that whatever, there are a lot of differences between HTML4 and HTML5. So what HTML5 sanitizer do is it will remove all the unpotential snippets. So if there are any things, so as a developer, what you have to make sure that whenever you are using HTML5 coding, you have to not only this, like whenever you make sure you're coding, you use comments, what the function is all about, and what you are going to achieve with this. So it's always good to have comments, and how to write comments is, oh, this is the one, like the button accept. So you can write the comment like this. This button is for, yeah. When you have a double slash, you can write your comment here. Comment here. This is one way of doing for single line. And if you want to have a double comment, you can use it for here, line 1, yeah, line 2 comment, yeah, line 2 comment, line 3. So how to do it is, you can select all this and see Control Shift and let's arrow. This is how you can do. Yeah. Control Shift. This one. You can make use of Control plus Shift. Shift plus this. Yeah. Control Shift plus the symbol, yeah, will give you the comments for the multiple lines. So this is what we have seen in this session. So in this session we have discussed the coding standards, how the control coding has been done, and the compatibility rules for different libraries, and we also seen the security information of the browser. So as a SAP UI5 developer, you have to make sure about naming conversions, compatibility rules, and each library how it behaves. So before using this library, you have to check the compatibility of that particular control, and then you can use it in your application. So target audience are always important. And next is browser security. Whenever you develop your application will be on the browser for testing or for the usage. So we have to handle that also. And then how you do the line comments, you have seen, and always good to comment your code so that in future someone reuse your code, that time they'll understand. If they want to enhance also, they can put the code as per the requirement. And then console log. For developing, use console log, but when you deploy your application on production system, that time you have to remove this console log and use it. And important is CSS. So always have a generic CSS, not a standard. Don't change the standard CSS library. So these are the things you need to consider while developing SAP UI5 application.